Everybody needs to get angry and let these people know that we are not their slaves. You hear that, Calderon?
But believe me, many of these guns are not going to honest American hands. Instead, thousands are ending up in the hands of criminals. With all due respect, if you do not regulate the sale of these weapons in the right way, nothing guarantees that criminals here in the United States, with access to the same power of weapons, will not decide to challenge American authorities and civilians. But I will ask Congress to help us with respect and to understand how important it is for us that you enforce current laws to stem the supply of these weapons to criminals and consider reinstating the assault weapons ban.
Just when I think I can't get any more outraged, something new happens that makes my temperature rise and my blood boil. Felipe Calderon, who clearly stole the election to become Mexican president, who's connected to all sorts of corrupt organizations down in Mexico, is in the United States traveling around lecturing us about states' rights and telling us that police, when they have first contact with an illegal alien for, say, drunk driving or some other suspected crime, can ask for their ID. Okay? While the American people are having our rights trampled on a daily basis, and John McCain and Lieberman are trying to pass legislation where U.S. citizens can be secretly arrested by the Pentagon or Justice Department and have our rights stripped and literally disappear into a black hole because the government says they think you're a terrorist, you no longer have a Bill of Rights, okay? But, the government starts crying about civil rights and lying about what's in the legislation, and Janet Napolitano admits she hasn't even read the bill when she's on the news.
You had a chance to review the new law that was passed by the state of Arizona?
I've not reviewed it in detail. I certainly know of it, Senator. Let me just say this. As you know and are well aware, that's not the kind of law I would have signed.
Because if you've read the bill, you know this is all a giant hoax. It isn't violating anybody's right. And Mexico has some of the most draconian laws against people that come into their country out of Guatemala from Central and South America. Some of the most draconian in the world. But that's not why I'm outraged. Okay, that's bad enough to have a foreign president who's illegitimate, who runs a failed, collapsed state with 20+ thousand deaths the last 2 years and crime pouring across our borders, ranchers being murdered. That's not what's got me mad. Can you imagine if an American president, say, went to Germany or China and told them what to do? Can you imagine if the British Prime Minister came here and said, you need to pass anti-Second Amendment legislation. You need to ban assault weapons, all semi-automatic rifles and handguns. That's what he did. That's what he said today to the Congress. In fact, here's the Reuters headline. Calderon urges U.S. to reinstate assault weapons ban and blames us for what's happening in Mexico.
If you do not regulate the sale of these weapons in the right way,
Mexico has a total gun ban for their citizens. So all these different gangs, some government-backed, others that aren't, can have these big wars with each other, and they have kidnappings and people being shaken down. Every time villagers try to stand up against tyranny, they get machine gunned. I mean, Mexico is a nightmare police state that is a black hole of corruption that is now sucking the United States into it. And Felipe Calderon, this gangster, comes to the United States and in effect says, I want the American people's guns. I want you to be peon slaves like the people of Mexico are. I want to be your El Jefe. I'm going to run your life. And Obama went further on the White House lawn. He said that our nations are not defined by their borders and that we're all one people.
In the 21st century, we are defined not by our borders, but by our bonds. So I say to you and to the Mexican people, let us stand together.
This is all about the North American Union. This is all about global government. And they're openly saying that our nation isn't about borders and that we transcend borders now. We're all one big world. Yeah, under global corporate rule that seeks to disarm the American people. I've always told you folks that the people pouring in from Mexico have been filled with an anti-American fervor. They've been taught that the Southwest belongs to Aztlan and was stolen. And they've been taught to be anti-Second Amendment. I mean, can't they see that they've been disarmed in their country and that we're not going to be disarmed here? That's my number one reason for being against open borders and this unlimited illegal immigration, is because over 90% of these people, when they finally become citizens and vote in recent years, are voting to take my guns. Look, I'm not your slave. You're not getting my guns. And that's why the sleeping giant that is America is rising. That's why Rand Paul beat the Republican establishment candidate in Kentucky, despite all the big bank financing. That's why the Republican incumbent senator just lost to a true patriot Tea Partier in Utah. That's why Arlen Specter, Magic Bullet, Specter is out. All incumbents are in trouble in both parties. You're going to be out of office, and your electronic voting machines aren't going to stop us, because when there's a landslide, they have trouble, carrying out the fraud. And we are going to defend this nation. And I want to ask Hispanic Americans this, because I've seen polls as high as 79% of Hispanic Americans want to be Americans. They love the American flag. They love the Bill of Rights. They love private property. They understand what's happening. Do you want Felipe Calderon coming up here and saying, I'm your El Jefe, and I represent you, and you work for me as a political weapon of Mexico inside the United States, teamed up with Washington and the big banks to break up the country? I mean, even if the Southwest was Mexico, it was also Spain, it was also Russia and California, it was also France. I mean, nobody could hold it until Western settlers came in. But even if there is some fake claim to that, the Native Americans are the ones that really have the true claim. So what? I mean, look at Mexico. Why are they fleeing to come up here, where we have private property, where we have the Second Amendment? This is incredible. We have the Mexican president up here saying, you will get rid of the borders. You will have blanket amnesty. I represent my people up here. This thug, this crook. Get the hell out of our country, Calderon. Get the hell out of the United States. It's time for Americans of all race, colors, and creeds to choose sides. America hasn't been perfect, but it's the best country in the world. The U.S. population is only 4% of the world's population, and it had over half the wealth. We generated it through private property and liberty and inventiveness and rugged individualism. And we're now losing that engine. We are now collapsing. California is collapsing. They're going to 4-day-a-week school. They're laying off half the cops in major cities. I talk to people that I know in California where they say major roads get washed out. They just shut them and say, that's it, no more road. They're announcing they're not going to fix the sidewalks anymore. We're imploding into a third world country, ladies and gentlemen. And now third world groups are being harnessed into political weapons, being led by this thug, Calderon, up here saying, I've got to have my guns banned because he says so. No one ever puts up with this type of foreign meddling in their country. And this is the wake-up call to everybody to exactly what Mexico represents, a narco-terrorist failed state with huge impoverished third world people being used as a political weapon by the globalists to bring in the North American Union and the New World Order. We have got to get the word out about Calderon's incredible arrogance and using American hospitality to come in here and basically piss on us and get in our face and tell us through political correctness that you better accept whatever we say. Listen to this, Calderon. I am not your property. I'm not your slave, and I will never be your slave. And you're not going to get my private property. You're not going to get my Second Amendment. And the American people are standing up and slamming the door on Mexico so it can collapse into hell on its own and not take us down with it. And all Americans better decide if they love their children. Do we want to collapse into the New World Order where they use poverty to control us? Mexico tripled the resources of the U.S., more billionaires than the U.S. even has, one of the poorest populations in the world. Do you want to live with a giant slave class on the bottom with a tiny elite on the top? That's what Calderon and the bankers are doing. They're all teamed up against us. And he's here saying, I want your guns. He's here telling our Congress, take these people's guns. I want them.
But I will ask Congress to help us with respect and to understand how important it is for us that you enforce current laws to stem the supply of these weapons to criminals and consider reinstating the assault weapons ban.
The American giant is rising, and people are picking sides right now. Don't forget it. You're not getting my guns, so you can hack us up like in your movie Machete.